Hello and welcome to Homegrown, Planting Seeds for AAC Growth. I'm Hannah Foley and I'm an AT professional specializing in AAC training and implementation to facilitate collaboration and effective training for the implementation of AAC. I am passionate about providing training and support to families and educational staff, concentrating on inclusion and integrating AAC into all activities to maximize participation and communication skill development of individuals with complex communication needs. My financial disclosures are that I receive income from speaking honoraria and online courses, and I have received codes to trial therapy products and tools. My non-financial disclosures are that I am a member of the United States Society for AAC.
Okay, hi everybody. So my name's Joanna Holmes, or Jo Holmes, and I've put there that I'm a parent of a child with complex communication needs, and I've put non-practicing, maybe recovering speech and language therapist. And I heard somebody, a retired physio, refer to themselves as a recovering physiotherapist, and I actually thought that's really interesting because one of the things that I have reflected on a lot since stopping practicing so I could care for Lucy is some of the things that are ingrained in our profession that really I think we maybe need to change. And that's why I kind of like the idea of recovering. But to be honest, anybody who knows me knows that I won't be out of the profession very long, and sort of can't really help myself. So I've engrossed myself in the world of AAC just to find ways to support my daughter, and I enjoy telling our story, which you will hear a little bit more about later. Now, and I have watched a lot of presentations from the US, and apparently we need to do disclosures. So, okay, I earn absolutely nothing except a very small amount from the UK government for being a stay-at-home parent carer. So no one's paying me a salary to be here or do any of the things I do, really. I am a non-practicing member of the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists. I'm a member of Communication Matters, which is the UK branch of ISAC. And I'm a member of One Voice, which is a UK charity supporting families. You will also see a lot of images of Smartbox software. I'm in no way sponsored by Smartbox, but that is what we have chosen to use for Lucy. So that's why there's all that there. I think that's all my disclosures. I'll hand over to Sarah.
Awesome. I might start saying I'm a recovering speech therapist, even though I've practiced. But I really like that. I think that we have a lot to unlearn and a lot to learn. So anyways, I'm a speech pathologist and assistive technology consultant in a public school district in upstate New York. My district has a big focus on inclusion. So I do a lot of presenting on AAC specific to inclusion, also teletherapy, but we're kind of moving away from that now. In terms of my disclosures, I have a salary from my school district, Ithaca City School District. I make small amount of income from my private practice, where I sometimes do teletherapy evaluations or speaking engagements. And then non-financial disclosures, I'm a member of ASHA, as well as ASHA's SIG 12, which is our AAC special interest group.
Over the past few years, there has been a shift in the AAC field from the expert model in which the SLP is in charge of AAC assessment and implementation, and they are considered to be the expert, to more of a transdisciplinary approach where the responsibilities and roles of the SLP is distributed among all members of AAC support teams. This has resulted in families and parents of those who have complex communication needs picking an AAC system and implementing it themselves, avoiding the extended wait lists to get a formal AAC assessment, and removing other access barriers, such as financial constraints and geographical constraints. Today, we are going to focus on how families of those with complex communication needs can get their child started and support AAC implementation at home and plant seeds for AAC growth extending well into the future. Today, we will discuss how to secure an AAC device, how to choose the best AAC system, explore practical strategies to teach AAC at home, and finally discuss how to get the AAC team to be on the same page.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about how to get started with AAC. And one of the things that we have chatted about as we've been planning this is the idea that there's no one right path or one specific path to AAC and to starting that that process, that experience. I think traditionally, the path to AAC has probably been through a speech and language therapy, or speech language pathologist assessment. When I say speech and language therapy, that's what I mean. And that's certainly what I was expecting as a parent. So although I am an SLT, a recovering one, I worked with people who stutter or stammer for the most of my career. So any therapists who are listening, you will know that that is quite different to working with AAC, and it's quite different to working with children with complex communication needs and cognitive disabilities, and the number of things that that are affecting Lucy's communication development. So what I was expecting was that one day a therapist would come to our house as part of the early intervention that we were going to get, and this therapist was going to be amazing. She was probably a she might have been a he, or a they. I thought they were just going to be such a brilliant therapist, and they were going to come and they were going to work with me and work out how we were going to support this little girl who is likely to have very, very complex communication needs. Maybe if I tell you just briefly, Lucy has a condition called Emmanuel syndrome, which is a genetic condition which affects all areas of development. And before we saw a speech and language therapist, the one thing that I had been told about this diagnosis in terms of communication was that 80% of children are non-verbal. That is the stat that I was given, and 20% have some verbal speech. And I wasn't given much else in terms of how children and adults with Emmanuel syndrome communicate. So I was hoping for this wonderful therapist who would come along and she would go, oh yeah, Emmanuel syndrome, not heard of it, pretty rare, but I've got all these ideas that we can share and let's work together. That unfortunately isn't what happened. My experience was quite far from that, really. Because by this point we had a really, really long wait, like 2 years. We got a therapist who was seeing us for Lucy's swallowing difficulties, but it was a really long wait for communication. So by then I'd been calling friends and using my network and working out what the evidence was. And I'd been starting to think about core vocabulary, and that maybe I didn't need to label everything in the house with a symbol, and various other things. And that's not the approach that the therapist that came to see us took. She wanted to use photographs. She wanted to do a lot of matching. She wasn't very positive about the idea of being able to learn core vocabulary because the symbols were so abstract. And so that wasn't the path that was, I would hope for this wonderful traditional path. And that's not, I realized quickly that wasn't how it was going to go for us. And I will talk a little bit about what we did do. But just to say, there are loads of different ways that people come into AAC. I know people who haven't had the opportunity until they're much older, even adults. I know many families who have started this journey on their own and sought out information. And I know some great therapists who are supporting this work. But I also know that therapists are in can be in very limited positions. So they might work for a particular organisation that funds a particular pathway, and maybe your child might not quite fit in. So there are many, many ways of approaching AAC. And for us, it was getting started at home and getting started doing something. And then when the professionals got involved who were into AAC and interested in it, then they're coming along with us rather than them directing what's happening. So I'll talk a little bit about what we actually did. Sarah, if it's all right to move on to the next slide. Oh, you go back one. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to call these the Prerobust AAC days, because what we did was based on what I remembered from about 12 years earlier working in some special schools, bits that I looked up online, things that were going on locally, and a bit of asking friends. And so we did a variety of things. We did Makaton sign. I'm not sure how much you use Makaton in the US. I feel like not much really. I think it's sort of in Australia a little bit. It's based on British Sign Language, a lot of it, but it is a language program that uses manual signs. So for example, this is look, this is ma, that it's a manual sign system, and they do have symbols that go along with it. But they're not in that common use really in the UK, aren't Makaton symbols, but the signing is, and that tends to be what a lot of people will know about in terms of AAC in the UK. They've done a really good job of promoting Makaton, so it's quite well known. So we did a little bit of that. We still occasionally do a little bit of that. We also started with single switches, so you can see there's the PCS MAR symbol. That's on a doozy switch, which might, again, be a really UK-y thing, but it's kind of like a Big Mac. Probably more like a Big Mac step by step. It's got a few other features. With core vocabulary in mind, we started with some single symbols, and there is going to be a video in a little while, but Lucy's got more and stop there on her tray. And I did print out and laminate a whole range. You can see there, all those symbols. I've got fridge, cup, what else of useless stuff have I got there? T-shirt. And honestly, I hardly have used those at all. Everything in the house was labelled. Some things still are. They don't really get used. They're just there. We did lots of cause and effect games, cause and effect toys. And we also, and I hope I've got a video uploaded of this, did some work around targeting on iPad apps. We used a lot of the Help Kids Learn iPad apps. I don't know whether you know of those. So there are a few that you can download for free, that are kind of stories that just the story moves on when you hit, and then a few that cost a little bit of money that involve targeting and some more complex stuff. So we did quite a lot of stuff, but what I've reflected on is that there are many, many, many times where I'm not doing anything that looks like AAC or formally looks like AAC. And I just thought it's worth noting that, because I think there's a lot of guilt that comes along with being a parent of anybody, but I think that's magnified when you have a child with complex needs in any way. If you're not doing AAC all the time, it doesn't mean you're doing nothing. So actually, you might not be doing AAC for a really good reason, because your kid needs to just chill out in front of the telly. You might not be doing it because you need a cuddle. You might be reading and enjoying a book, and not have any symbols on the go, but just the fact that you're doing that and looking at pictures all supports symbolic understanding. You might be having cuddles, you might be copying each other, playing turn-taking games. There is so much that you will be doing that builds those skills. And I think that's really important to remember when you're kind of doing this stuff.
I really love that point, and that's something I've shifted from the therapist lens of not having such a big focus on like model all day, every day, more modeling, because it's not realistic. And it's like you said, it's not necessary. It doesn't have to be like modeling every second of the day or using AAC all the time. So I think that's a good point. That's something I'm recovering from.
One of the recovery points.
Yeah.
So here's a little video of Lucy using the switch and a soft toy to play to develop cause and effect. She really likes how clicky the switch is.
That's awesome.
as well as Peter Rabbit. She still quite likes a good clicky switch. Okay, and this is a short clip of us looking together at more and stop are the two symbols that she's got there. I think looking with hindsight, what I might have liked to do is have a cardboard with more words and things hidden, but I didn't know that then. So what we've got here is two symbols in little picture frames from IKEA, so that I could see where she was looking. So let's have a look at that.
Great, we can. Lucy, do you remember this book? Can we have a look at it, love? It's called Row, Row, Row Your Boat. It goes, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Hey! Stopped. Wonder what to do. Did you like the book? Would you like some more? Let's have some more. More of the book. You ready? Look at this page. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Look. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Stop. Yeah, it stopped. Stop. Oh, some more. Some more. That's this one. More. More.
Okay, I won't play the whole 7 minutes of it. But as you can see, we're doing a little bit of modelling. It's a really simple activity, and I'm following what she's doing. So she's not actually using the symbols, but she's looking at what she wants. And the tap on the tray still very much means more. That's part of her system still now. She's got stronger, and it's a lot bigger now when she taps on the tray. And also, as you can see, we're combining therapies there because she's got her eye patch on, and we're trying to do some of the orthoptist therapy as well.
So we'll talk a little bit about what the SLP's role might look like. And in this process, like we said at the beginning, there's multiple paths to success, and this journey can look different for, it's probably to look different for everybody. So an SLP can definitely play an important and supportive role in finding an AAC system. SLPs have a background in language. Some of us have lots of training in AAC. Some of us might have no training in AAC. So there's probably going to be some varying skills and how much somebody can support you. A lot of times I think that we sort of picture this traditional path towards getting an AAC device as being driven by an SLP. because that's what a lot of funding sources require. So they, Medicaid won't fund unless an SLP is the one that's doing the evaluation, signing the report. But just because that's what a funding source has decided doesn't mean that that's the only way or that that's going to be the best way. I've talked to lots and lots of different parents on social media, on Instagram. Some of them live in areas where there just isn't access to an SLP, or it might be financially inaccessible, or the person just isn't meshing with what their vision is. So I know I've been guilty of that in the past, where I might have an idea of do an evaluation and go through feature matching, and I think this is the best system. But if it's not something the family is comfortable with, if they're not bought in, it's not going to be the best system. So I think that, now's a good time to question sort of why we've had this traditional path, and when is it going to be helpful and supportive to follow this traditional path. Getting funded devices is definitely a huge benefit that we want to be able to give to families and AAC users. So if you can find an SLP who's able to do that, awesome. But you also want to make sure you're finding somebody that kind of is going to jive with what your vision is, and somebody who will be collaborative and not just say, I'm making this decision and you've got to live with it.
Okay, so sort of linking in with what Sarah was just talking about, when we were thinking about this, it made me think of a chapter in this book, Speech and Language Therapy and Professional Identity. It's a really great book, and one chapter in particular at the end of the book really encourages therapists to reflect on things like what their motivations are for being a speech and language therapist or speech language pathologist, and what is driving that, and how that might impact on how you are and how you react to maybe having to be outside of that traditional role, maybe. And this is the conclusion, the last sentence from that chapter. You can read it, but I will read it out as well, because I think that might be helpful for some people. So it is the clinician that needs to continually examine his or her motivations, values, and belief systems to ensure that they do something with the clients rather than to the clients. So I think that's just something really worth thinking about, and really digging down, digging kind of deep as therapists and going, why did I choose this profession? Am I in it to save people? Am I in it to be the knowledgeable professional? What are those things that drove me into the profession? And they don't have to be the same things that keep you in it. So,
yeah, as we talk about recovery, and I also mentioned when we were looking over the slides that I love that it says continually examine, because like you just said, it could change, and there's so many things that I look back earlier in my career that I'm like, I can't believe I did that. And it's kind of that idea of when we know better, we do better. And I think it's really important to be able to admit when, hey, that wasn't maybe the most supportive way that I could have worked with that family, and how can we do better next time? And yeah, I love this whole quote. I'm definitely going to keep thinking about that.
Okay.
Please feel free to connect with any of us via AAC implementation is influenced by every individual with whom the learner comes in contact with on a regular basis. This includes, but is not limited to, the learner's family and caregivers, AAC mentors, teachers, peers, OTs, SLPs, and assistive technology professionals. While a transdisciplinary team is ideal, the reality is that it is not always possible for a multitude of reasons, such as the teacher is not on board with implementing AAC in their classroom. AAC implementation can be successful without one or more of these individuals involved. Creativity, open-mindedness, and collaboration are key.
And our theme here, homegrown, makes me think of a quote that I really like from one of my administrators who said, go to fertile ground. So like, go to the people that are like ready for it, that want the support, that are open to it, rather than the people that are already digging their heels in. So if you find yourself with an SLP that's like, oh, no, too early to start AAC, but the OT is like, let's try it, I'll support that. Then, think there's hopefully lots of people in the circle of support, that it might not be who you traditionally think of. It might be the teacher, who knows who's going to be most supportive. So to kind of think about it more flexibly like that.
I think one of the things that has looking and therapists, and what's driven, because there's a lot of talk of, well, one of my difficulties as a therapist is that parent caregivers don't buy in. We don't get buy-in, and they don't. And actually, from my point of view, I was like, well, that was the complete opposite of my experience. And I think it just shows how, however, what we read also brings this narrative that, well, maybe carers aren't that bothered about doing it, and actually we are, and they can often be, like you say, the key people who are driving it forward, and just working with whoever will work with them and not bothering with the ones who won't. So yeah.
So now we'll talk about some thoughts on the best AAC system and what that might be. So I love this quote from Rachel Madel. Rachel says this all the time. If you follow her, listen to the Talking with Tech podcast, and Rachel's take on this kind of like, is there one best system, is that she says, instead of focusing on finding the perfect device, focus on training communication partners to support any device. So I think there's kind of this sort of like persistent myth that there's going to be like one and only one best AAC system for each person. And also that maybe you need an SLP to be finding that one and only system. And, I don't think that that's fully true. I think that, that there's a lot more to it than just sort of like one and only one system. So if we look at the next slide, we can talk about some considerations for this. So what does make an AAC system the best? And also, who gets to decide that? We really want to involve all stakeholders. And as Hannah said, really focusing on families and caregivers and getting user input. And that includes if you're working with an adult, or if you're working with an 18-month-old, we have to find ways to get input from the person who's actually going to be using the system. I saw in terms of this like user input, on Instagram, I follow Jenna, whose handle is Builders and Bards, and she has, I think, 2 sons who use AAC. And she was sharing, as she was trying to find what was the best system for them, she printed out the home screen of a bunch of different systems. And one of her son consistently crumpled up and threw in the trash one of the systems. And so she was like, I guess not that one. So I really liked that for a creative way to be getting input from a younger child. So we talk about feature matching, and Joanna put in a link here to a practical AAC blog post on feature matching. So this is where we look at what does the child or student or, potential AAC user, what do they need in terms of access methods, how the symbols are going to look, how many buttons on a page. And then we first start with what do they need, and then we find a system that will match and will be the best match and give them all those things. We also want to look at providing robust AAC. I messed that up. The feature matching one is something is a link I added. The robust AAC, that's practical AAC. Click the links, you'll see what else is there to explore. So Erin Sheldon made this point to me one time that we talk a lot about robust AAC, but we don't really have one common agreed upon definition of what that is. So according to this article and some other sources, some things that we might include are, it could be high tech or it could be low tech. We want to make sure we have all parts of speech. So there's pronouns, prepositions, verbs, and nouns. We want to make sure there's core words so that people can be flexible in what they say, access to the alphabet. I'm sure I'm forgetting some of them, but we want to make sure that we're not giving a system that's going to immediately limit somebody. We want to look at a system that's going to grow long term, because we don't know how long somebody's going to need it. So we really want to have like years and years and years down the road be what we have in mind. And then the other thing that Joanna added that I love, this idea of the best AAC system is going to be one that is evolving over time, because it's not going to be just we make this one decision based on a snapshot or based on where somebody is when they're 2 or when they're 5. We want to be prepared to adapt over time. And Joanna, do you want to share what you had said, something that you're evolving?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what I will talk about in a little bit about Lucy's system is around using an iPad and direct access. But what we have found is that although Lucy can use direct access for some simple games and things like that, actually her motor skills are not quite accurate enough to really do well, and for us to work well with her on attributing meaning, because we're not really sure which bit she meant to hit, and I don't think she's even sure which bit she meant to hit. So we are exploring eye gaze and head camera. We're kind of in a little bit of an assessment period at the minute, so she's looking at both of those options. So it's still the same software system, still the same vocabulary package we're looking at the moment, but we're just, we made a decision with the information we had at the time. And as we've seen things evolve for her, we're thinking actually maybe something a little bit different will suit. And I think it's important to be able to do that, really, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, ready for the next slide?
So,
okay.
As clinicians, we were taught to use evidence-based practice, and when it comes to selecting an AAC system for an individual, that means that we feature match to determine the most appropriate system for each client. Feature matching proved as a high-quality assessment, but it can only really be successful where there is a SLP or ATP working with the learner and the scope for everyone to be involved. There's also a risk that feature matching could lead to prohibitive recommendations. For example, Gail Van Tatenhove states that it's unethical to choose a device based on price. However, when parents are the drivers, this may well be the case. Parents won't be doing feature matching. They may well be influenced by a good relationship with the provider and the support they have had from them. We must not devalue this, especially if this has happened where there was no support. We should celebrate resourcefulness. When selecting an AAC system, parents mainly consider 3 factors, which are the 3 Ps: price, practicality or usability, and provider input. For many parents, price is the factor that has the most influence. However, it is important to weigh the price against practicality and provider input to make sure that they balance out the price.
Definitely. I think when parents are getting involved and making their own decisions, I think price inevitably is going to be part of that. And I think, it's wonderful to say, well, everybody should have a perfect assessment and get just the right thing, whatever it costs. But it's probably better to start with something than nothing. So I thought it might be useful to talk a little bit about where we came from, went to as a family, really. Earlier on, I gave some examples of what we did before Robust AAC. So we were still looking at core vocabulary. There was quite a lot we were doing, but I did work for a little while a few years ago with people who use AAC, and I was able to go to the Angelman UK conference in 2019, and it was really eye-opening. So I saw Jane Farrell speak there about robust AAC systems and about literacy. That's a whole other presentation though. But at that point, I decided it was time to actually take the plunge and move into a robust system and a consistent high-tech system or powered system. But we had, at that point, we were working with an AAC savvy SLT in Lucy's school. She'd started school by this point. But there were some fixed factors that we were thinking about in this. We had inherited an iPad from Lucy's great granny. So at that point, we were able to have a dedicated device, which was important because Lucy had become used to her old iPad being used for playing. And I think our faces might be slightly, are they slightly covering the picture? I'm not sure. There's a couple of pictures here that just illustrate that. There's one, I don't know whether you can see, she's got her iPad mounted on her tray with her communication software, and she has used that to prop up her iPad with YouTube on it, and was watching Room on the Broom, I think. So we definitely needed to have two devices from her point of view, so she could see one thing as a dedicated device. I also like this picture. I generally model on Lucy's device, but I think one day I must have read something or somebody said, oh, it's really important not to model on your child's device. So I decided to use the other iPad, and she just took them both off me and was just like babbling on both one at a time. So having a dedicated device was important, and what we had was an iPad that was good to go and we weren't using for anything else. As you can see as well, the dedicated iPad's in a black case and the phone iPad is in a green case. So that was one of a fixed factor. We kind of knew at that point it had to go on an iPad. We had done some work, and I think I might have put a video in, I'm not sure, on targeting using the Help Kids Learn games. So we knew she could target something quite small on an iPad screen. What we didn't take into account was how she was using the heel of the hand and things, which is why we're looking at different access now. The other fixed factor was that we were using picture communication symbols. That should be better reference. It's Toby Dynavox's board maker symbols. That's what was in use in school. And because she went to nursery and to a playgroup at the same place she now goes to school, we knew that that was the symbol set that they were using. So that really needed to stay. And we really wanted a system, because of Lucy's difficulties with motor control, that supported motor planning. I mean, that's good practice anyway, but this was all a bit new to me, and so that's what I was kind of thinking. A bonus with the system that we eventually chose was that school were already familiar with it because they had some other children using it. So we ended up using SuperCore 30 on Grid for iPad. And that was the process about how we decided on our device and what vocabulary. So it wasn't a massive piece of feature matching. It was the SLT in school and I having a chat about what factors we thought were important and what we knew about what we thought she could achieve that led to that, really. So, okay, so I'm going to hand over, move on to the next slide. I think, there we go.
Your child now has an AAC system. Now what? Successful AAC implementation does not miraculously occur on its own by placing the device in front of the learner. It takes time, effort, consistency, and creativity, but do not be overwhelmed because implementation is meant to be fun and engaging for everyone involved. You don't need to spend time coming up with extravagant activities to target communication and language skill development in those with complex communication needs. especially at home when time and motivation may not be maximized. Instead, keep it simple, natural, and most importantly, fun. One strategy is to infuse AAC into daily routines, such as meal times. There are so many naturally occurring communication opportunities during daily activities. Slow down and take advantage of them. For example, meal times are great for practicing commenting, requesting, and protesting about the food they like, don't like, want, or don't want. Similarly, existing activities that are of high interest and motivation to the learner are great opportunities to implement AAC. Perhaps they are watching their favorite show. Pause it every few minutes to comment about what's happening. Wait to press play until they initiate the request. Research has shown that repetition with variety enhances comprehension and fluency in relation to language. The basic idea is to create opportunities to practice using language on the AAC system that are not boring and engaging the learner by varying aspects of the activity while still targeting the same communication skill and developing current and new skills. Use the same activities over and over, especially if the learner is engaged in a certain activity, but each time, or each day, or each week to the activity with them, change what you target during the activity. For example, one week you may target the core word like and commenting, and the next week you would target a different core word or communicative function, such as requesting or protesting. Children always love to play with technology, including voice-activated technology, such as Amazon Alexa. Alexa is able to recognize the voice on AAC devices, so your client is able to activate Alexa and tell it to do whatever they want it to do, such as play their favorite music. We can create a vocabulary page within the AAC system for the client's favorite commands for Alexa, so they can easily access and use those frequently used and/or favorite commands. Once the individual learns that their words hold the power to get the consequence they want, they will become increasingly motivated to use their device in other contexts in order to get a response, especially when engaging in communication with others. It is crucial in the development of communication skills to respond to all communication attempts, and we can harness the innovative features of Alexa, Siri, FaceTime, and any other voice-activated technology to reinforce that if they communicate with their AAC device, they will get some sort of reaction or feedback, which will help them discover the power of their words and will hopefully motivate them to do the same and use their device in other contexts with more communication partners.
Yeah, I think using technology and TV and things like that are really powerful motivators, aren't they? Even if we had the best intentions that our kids aren't going to have too much screen time. That never happens. One of my favorite things that I have discovered is that on Disney Plus, you can, well, I think it came with these settings in that it doesn't automatically play the next episode. Or maybe it does, but just in anything Disney, the titles take so long because they've got every single language and who said every character in every language. But one of Lucy's favourite TV shows at the minute, who am I kidding? Everybody in our house's favourite TV show at the minute is Bluey. You seen Bluey? Oh, it's so good. If you've not watched Bluey,
Oh, yes.
It's so good. But they're about 7 minutes long of these episodes. And what I have loved about setting it so that they stop is that I feel like I could be doing some AAC and doing something else at the same time. So we have a TV in the kitchen. So Lucy might get home from school. She'll be in front of the TV. She's got her device set up. And I will be doing something else. And when it stops, I'll be like, okay, it stopped. And I just wait. I just wait to see what she's going to do. And sometimes it's that bang on the tray. Sometimes it'll be an activation of a cell on the device. Sometimes she won't do anything, but occasionally I've then turned around and she's just staring at me like, do this. And what I've really appreciate about that is actually I can do something else at once as well. It doesn't feel like I have to sit down and I have to do the AAC. Like, it's just here, and this is just natural because it's tea time. I'm busy. She needs to chill out watching telly, but we've just snuck that little bit of sabotage in so that she has to do something to communicate with me.
I love that. And Joanna, that reminds me that I was going to say this when we talked about robust AAC, that one feature of what makes a system robust is that it is multimodal. Just like you described, that there's going to be lots of different ways that she can tell you what she wants. And sometimes it's going to be on the device, but not always. And that, that total communication approach should all be considered when we're talking about like what is robust.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Lucy gets really mad. Like, if we're doing something that she really likes and it stops. You saw that video earlier where she was reaching for the book. Well, that's not changed because she still knows that works. And so maybe if somebody's far away or something stopped and it's not immediately, she can't immediately reach for it, maybe she'll use more or something then. But if it's right there in front of her, she's going to use the most efficient way, which is grabbing it.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. Okie doke. I think the next thing is I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our AAC, using AAC at home and away from home. And yeah, I've just got a few pictures here of us doing various things. One of the things that I have found the most helpful, and it's so simple in terms of implementing AAC at home, is just having it all over the place. So my favorite thing is my laminator and my matte laminating pouches, so they're not too shiny and you can see them quite well, they're not reflecting off things. And when we first got the AAC, if you can see this first picture where Lucy's got a switch and a 12 cell board, that's the Supercore learning grid from Smartbox, which is part of the grid software. And I printed those out for every activity, and they were just all over the house. We tend to use a larger grid now, and that's a whole other conversation as well. But so they were just there. So I didn't have to remember to get something out, we're going to do this. If I suddenly, in the middle of having a bath, remembered, she's enjoying this, maybe I could model more, then it was just there. If I didn't remember, it didn't matter, but at least it meant that it was there when I needed it. And that's still the case. We've got boards everywhere. I have one in my handbag. So I've got my handbag here. So I have a little one in my handbag as well. So that whatever we're doing, if I think, it actually is an opportunity, I can be doing some modelling. I think that's probably the most useful thing I've done. So they're up now instead of the symbols of everything named in the house. So there's a couple of examples of what we've been doing here. So here Lucy's cooking. You can't quite see it, actually. I've covered it up with another picture, but she's got a big like smoothie switch on the tray, which is connected to a blender, like a mixer. My husband's a massive geek. And during lockdown, he made a switch interface using a Raspberry Pi computer, and it's got like an LCD screen and everything. It's very cool. So that's what we're using there. And so I was modeling. It stopped. We need to look. Do we need to do some more? And we were making pancakes. So then we got to eat pancakes. There's a picture here with symbols on her tray. She has symbols on her tray, and this is her, like, in the house chair. She also has a wheelchair for out and about, which her newest wheelchair has a tray. So we've put symbols on there, just so they're always around. So that's been really helpful. As you can see, there's a picture here with her iPad, and she's reading a book with Daddy. She actually looks a bit cross about it. She was enjoying it. And so when we're reading, we're using and modelling words like look, turn, see, again, more, stop. We might use descriptions. It's funny, it's silly. We might use it when we go for a walk. Go, stop, look, it's cold. All kinds of words that we could be modelling out and about. Actually, I have quite a funny story about going for a walk. I'd put it onto the animals page. So no, they're not car, but we were out for a walk. There were sheep and cows and all kinds of animals around. And so I was kind of going, oh, look at the cow, look at the sheep. And Lucy just kind of went wild babbling on the device and said, pterodactyl, to which a group who were just walking past has just turned and heard this child say pterodactyl when we were looking at cows, and they laughed, and Lucy looked at them and laughed, and it was such a lovely moment. I'm pretty sure Lucy has no idea what a pterodactyl is, but she knew she'd said something funny, and she knew she'd had that social influence on people, which she absolutely loved. So I do advocate having lots of buttons open for babbling. Maybe not quite as much as we have. Sometimes I think, oh, maybe we could do with a bit less, but it has been useful. We have also, I'm hoping this video is going to work. We've also used the iPad and single switch devices for particular things. So Lucy is in the Girl Guides, Girl Scouts, depending on where you are in the world. So she's a rainbow guide, or was a rainbow guide. She's a brownie now. And so we programmed her promise into the device. So here she is.
What's your rainbow promise? I promise that I will do my best to think about my beliefs and to be kind and helpful. That's right, clever girl.
And what was really lovely about that was, so the rainbows that they're meeting make their promise at the beginning of every single meeting, and Lucy became the initiator of that for everybody. So we had it mounted, and the girls, we sing a song. I ended up being a rainbow leader. That's another story as well. We sing a song, and then everybody just waited, and then Lucy activated, and then all the girls said their promise. So that was just a really lovely way of including that in that way.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really cute. Her friends and peers have been absolutely brilliant. So she has been to Rainbows. We've used the AAC there. She's now at Brownies. And she's very lucky, actually. So I have a friend who supports her at Brownies. I don't go to Brownies with her, but the friend just happens to be a speech and language therapist who happens to work with AAC. So she's having loads of opportunities to influence and playing games and do a bit of leadership within that programme. The pictures that we've got here, so in the top right, there's one of Lucy's friends, Edward, with some pages I printed out when we all went for a trip to the zoo. So I did include lots and lots of fringe vocabulary, because that's what the boys that we were there with were also interested in, but they had all the core as well. So we were talking about, oh, look at the leopard, and they had that just available so they could chat to Lucy, and they were showing her it and going, oh, I can see this. You can see here her little friend George, he just kind of joins in and he will say messages to Lucy on her device. Notably, that was very moving on the way to school the other day. He said, I love you.
Oh, that's awesome.
And here we've got a little video that's an example of just having the board. We didn't particularly have it out. We were having a walk, and I just started running because it was funny, and Georgie needed to get rid of some energy. So I was like, come on, let's have a run. And I was like, hold on, I've got a board here. So I'll just show you what's happening.
What's that? No, I just thought. He's got picture cards that Lucy uses to say stop and go.
And then he's showing you, and he shows her, and he's going, we stopped. And then he went, go, and we ran, go, go, go. So that was a lot of fun. So they're just some really simple ways that we build it in at home, and they're not, I mean, running like that, it's not a complicated thing. It is that key of just having it there that really made that happen well. So yeah, it's nice to look back over the fun times.
I know, I love these examples.
Okay, I will move on the slide. There we go.
When a plant grows from a seed, the first thing it does is put down roots. I've never heard anyone say that parents weren't critical to the successful use of AAC. Many AAC users I've come to know cite their parents' influence and determination as a key factor in their success. I'm in many forums where I see parents advocating for AAC. Clinicians talk about how it's hard to engage parents and get them on board. When I was reflecting on this presentation and the analogy of planting seeds, it made me think about what are the things that have helped and hindered our success with AAC at home. I wondered if reflecting more broadly on what the skills or that parents need may also help planning support. So yes, start small just like Joanna did with achievable goals, but alongside that support parents' skills in getting this going for the long game and recognize what they already bring to the table. The first route is knowing what's good. This relates to information and how to make sense of the wealth of information available. Look for overarching common themes and triangulate or connect them to have comprehensive information to guide your decision making. The next route is presuming potential, depending on the path to diagnosis, and where families are met, the idea of presuming potential may be new and in conflict with the plethora of messages they've had about their child's limitations. Every child and person with a disability is impacted differently and has different levels of abilities and capabilities. Regardless of that, they still need to know that there is some expectation of them. If that's not present, they will think, why should I even try to communicate when nobody thinks I can? Low expectations lead to low achievement and minimal effort and performance for those with complex communication needs. Also, if children are taught from a young age that they only have to use their AAC at therapy and at school, there is not going to be any carryover and motivation for them to use it in other settings, because they have been taught for all of these years they only have to use it at school and not at home and in public. If this pattern continues, they are going to quickly catch on and eventually develop resistance towards using AAC that is difficult to break as they age. The third root of AAC success is confidence and advocacy skills, and this is the big one. Families not only need to have skills to implement at home, but also to implement out and about. This will involve dealing with questions whether you want to or not, noticing stares at the store, advocating for everything else, and just being generally shattered. Having conversations with other people can just be exhausting. Therefore, confidence and advocacy skills are crucial. The fourth root is understanding key concepts, such as motor planning principles, core and fringe vocabulary, and modeling, as they allow for a lot of flexibility during implementation. By having a foundational understanding of such key concepts, it leverages parents' advocacy skills, as they can not only say what supports that their child requires, but they can also explain why it is necessary. This is a particularly important skill for parents to have when their child starts school, as they have to strongly advocate to the school team for their child's needs and rights. The last, but certainly not weakest, root of AAC success is technical skills, also known as operational competency, which includes knowing how to turn it on and off, editing vocabulary files, and knowing who to call for technical support. All 5 of these roots have influence over the growth of the AAC success tree.
So I love that wrap up. And we also, talked and brainstormed a bit about like what this idea of like getting the team on board. But as we talked about in the beginning of the session, that's going to look different for everybody, because it could mean being a caregiver who's struggling to get an SLP on board. It could mean an SLP that's, struggling to collaborate and work with the family and get on the same page. And I think, I love a lot of things about social media, but like, as you mentioned, there are some kind of, I've seen some things of like, oh, and if only the parents could model more, and things like that, which I don't think that helps us all get on the same page. That I think a lot of times people, we want to be collaborative, be open-minded, be willing to compromise. That's something I've definitely had to work on, is that I don't always have the right answer, and, open it up to the whole team. What does the teacher think, the OT? What about the Girl Scout leader? What have you noticed? Have open communication so that we're really, as an SLP, being, making time to collaborate with families, however works for them, and really just being flexible, because we are going to, in the best case scenario, we're going to come together as a team and make our best guess for what we think is going to work right now. And then be flexible for when people disagree with you, be flexible for when the learner is showing us something different or showing us that something doesn't work. That I think those are all going to be helpful in this process. I don't know. I definitely don't have all the answers in this, but I think like being compassionate and understanding of where other people on the team are coming from is something, that can be helpful too.
I think that goes all ways as well, because I know I have certainly been guilty of, from as a therapist, of kind of maybe not being as flexible as I could be, but I think I have as a parent as well, because I've invested so much time and energy and money into getting this going, that actually then maybe when other people aren't quite as on board as I am, I found it really frustrating. And I think we all need to be prepared to sort of collaborate and work together, and understand that nobody's actually out there to sabotage the process. We might have different views, different knowledge, different places that we're coming from, but genuinely everybody really probably wants to help in some way or other. And I think I need to keep that in mind as a parent sometimes, because otherwise I just get really angry.
Yeah.
So
I think, now we're on to resources. So we'll go over a couple things. We'll just kind of go through quickly some additional things that have helped us learn, things that we've shared with other families, that if you want to get more information, here are some ideas. So we have, is this stuff that you collected, Joanna?
yeah, do you want me to talk a little bit about these three
Talk about
bits?
this slide, yeah.
Yeah. So the ACE Centre is a UK-based charity who support AAC. They provide some of the regional services in the UK as well. They have some awesome resources. When I was really getting started, this book was great. It's book 2, but actually it's getting started with symbol-based AAC. There is a text-based one as well on there, and they have loads of symbol boards, alphabet boards, and things that you can download for free. So if you're getting started and really just getting started, that is a great place to start. This Communication, The Sky's the Limit by Jane Farrell at the Angelman Conference is the presentation that I was physically at back in the day, listening to, and it's really superb. So if you follow that link, there's a video of it, and she's got all the slides from that presentation there as well. And Project Car is great. I'm sure Hannah and Sarah are well aware of Project Car as well. That's based out of the US. I can't remember what university, Illinois, maybe. Can't remember.
UNC Chapel Hill.
UNC Chapel Hill. Okay, there we go. It's great. There's courses, little mini courses that you can do to get started with things. There's things about adapting for different visual needs, different physical needs. It's really accessible, and again, loads of free downloads and things that you can get started with. I think it launched in like 2016, 2017. Just like a couple of years too late for me. I wish I'd had that one when I first started out.
Yeah, Project Core is awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And this is your blog, Joanna. Awesome. Hannah and I both have followed you for a while on Instagram, so you've been a great resource for us.
Thank you.
Loved learning from you, so that's another great thing to check out.
Okay.
Sensational Learning with Penguin. Do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, can do. So this is a lady called Malin who is she's homeschooling her autistic son, and they're using AAC as well. That's a very strong thread through what she puts out there. So this is a particular blog that she's done about AAC, which is a really great resource. But she's just great to follow, and has lots of interesting things to say about AAC and homeschooling and autism. So yeah, worth a follow.
And this is Dana Nieder's blog. So her daughter had used AAC and she was blogging a lot, and I've learned a ton from her. She doesn't, I think, keep it updated so much anymore, but there's so many awesome posts on her blog. And specifically this one, I realized I probably should have talked about this more at the beginning, but she has this blog post that was very impactful for me as an SLP, where she talks about SLPs being gatekeepers to AAC. So I think that that's kind of, as we're talking about that concept of like, it doesn't have to be SLP driven, these decisions, because sometimes if families are looking towards an SLP to say, okay, tell us, what system should we use? When should we start? And the SLP is saying, oh, not yet, it's too soon, or start with something small, that we can unintentionally, because like you said, Joanna, we don't know, I don't think any of us get into this profession to intentionally gatekeep or to harm anyone. But it's just maybe like a lack of knowledge or understanding that can end up being really harmful if we're kind of preventing people from getting started or slowing them down. So this blog post was a big one for me.
Really powerful.
And Kim Rankin, she's another parent of an AAC user who we love to follow. We touched on literacy a little bit, and Kim shares lots and lots of ideas for using literacy at home. She also homeschools. So she's on, I don't know about Facebook, definitely on Instagram, and she has this blog. Oh yes, on Facebook too. So another great person to check out and learn from. This video Joanna made, which was really helpful, that outlined some different resources specifically for families to get started. So tried to get some different formats. If videos are easier for you, here's something good to watch.
Because one of the things that I mentioned in this video that we haven't particularly talked about yet here is kind of support groups for parents. So I know in that video I talk about One Voice, who are a UK-based charity. I also get support through Communication Matters. But there are, I'm sure in your localities, I guess people could join USAC, and there are various organisations, and also Facebook groups like Kate Ahern's Model, Motivate, Move Out of the Way, and Ask Me, I'm an AAC User, are both really great resources for families, I think, to get into as well. So yeah.
Then we have some podcasts that we liked. I actually haven't listened to this one, the My Complex Parenting podcast, but it looks really, really good. So I'm putting this on my podcast list. So here are some episodes to get started with. And we have Talking with Tech, which I've loved learning from. I picked out some episodes that specifically are interviews with AAC users, because I think that's something that's really, really important, that we have to be learning from the people who are using AAC, and the people that are supporting it at home is something really, really valuable that we need to do more of.
I think that's something that really is critical in terms of when we do talk about parent buy-in and things, that actually there is a whole piece missing, I think, from what we do, that is, hey, have a chat with these adults who use AAC. Call Hannah.
Yes.
Okay.
And more Talking with Tech episodes that are with parents of AAC. There's more people I love to learn from. And then there's some episodes of the Loma podcast. So Loma podcast is done by a mom of an AAC user. And I love listening to both of these podcasts, but Loma is really fun to listen to and has some awesome information on lots of different topics.
Okay, that's just a reference for the book that we talked about earlier. So, okay.
Please feel free to connect with any of us via social media. Our Instagram and Twitter handles are hannah.r.foley, Mummy vs. AAC, and Sarah Gregory SLP. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And
Thank
thank you
you.
both. This was really fun.
It was great.